Welcome back to week 9 of the DSR channel, and we're still covering the Forgotten Realms Heroes of Faerun book that came out last week. And in this episode, I'm covering the epic boons that came out with that book. All right, so here's the chart of how I rank them all. So if that's all you cared about, you can stop right here. You don't need to keep going. And also, you don't need to screenshot this or anything. You can get this off the Google Drive. I got it in both PDF and CSV formats on the Google Drive for your convenience. And let me just talk about the party roles for a moment to make sure that it's clear if you haven't seen my previous videos. Party roles, in my definition, means you have chosen to play this role for your character, right? It is not the other way around. There is no ideal party composition. None of these roles are necessary for a party. You don't need a healer. You don't need a tank. You don't need any of those. All right. This is just if you are trying to be the tank, for example, then all of my ratings that say this is for a tank are things that you might consider. I'm not saying you have to have them, especially at this level, right? So there's one of these feats that would be directly contributable to a tank, right? That's the Boon of Desperate Resilience. All right, I am not saying that if you're playing a tank, you have to take that role, that epic boon, okay? I'm saying this will give you a tanking feature. This epic boon will give you a tanking feature, okay? And if you're not tanky enough, you keep dying, then you might want to consider that. But if you are tanky enough, I would look at something else. Diversify your character's features so that you can be useful in more situations. Because if you're useful in more situations, you're going to have more fun. You're going to be doing things in more situations. Okay? Boon of Bloodshed. So first up, you can choose any ability score increase up to a maximum of 30. Then the first feature you get is Killer's Fortune. When an enemy you can see is reduced to 0 hit points, you gain advantage on the next attack roll you make before the end of your turn. So that's on any target. Your second feature, Power from Pain. Once per turn, when you make an attack roll while bloodied, you can deal extra damage to the target equal to your proficiency bonus. The extra damage's type is the same as the attack's type. So they're really doubling down on the bloodied condition now. We've got, 3 epic boons that trigger on bloodied, and 1 or 2, 3 general feats that trigger on bloodied. So they're really leaning into that, which is fine and cool. If you're going to use a condition, might as well make it mean something. Unfortunately, this one is quite weak. Okay, so you're going to gain advantage on your next attack roll, which if this were a general feat that you could take at level 4, I would say it would be pretty good. But for an epic boon, this is pretty bad, right? You got to stack this up against combat prowess epic boon, which just means once per turn, you can just say, no, I hit instead of miss. That is way better than this. And the damage increase from this is so minimal. It's only once per turn, damage equal to your proficiency bonus. If it is on every attack, if they didn't limit it to once per turn, this would be as good as Great Weapon Master. But Great Weapon Master is on every attack with your attack action. So if you're a fighter, 4 attacks, get your proficiency bonus. And this only triggers while bloodied. So it's not even, so that extra qualifier makes this a lot worse than Combat Prowess or Great Weapon Master even, or, I wouldn't take this on a rogue. I mean, maybe, because then you can, maybe. I still don't. I would take combat prowess over this as a rogue. Like on every build that cares about dealing damage, combat prowess is better than this by a significant margin. So this one's a bummer. All right, Boon of Bountiful Health. You can increase any ability score up to 30. You gain up by 1 up to 30, not all the way to 30. When you gain temporary hit points, increase the number of temporary hit points you gain by 5. Superior recuperation. When you spend 1 or more hit die to regain hit points, you can instead use the highest number possible for each die. Okay, so this one's interesting because it's really bad if you have no features to trigger temporary hit points, right? No one in the party is giving you temporary hit points. You can't give yourself temporary hit points. That first part is then useless. Even if they can give you temporary hit points, like let's say you're a wizard and you give yourself false life. Well, okay, you're getting 5 extra temporary hit points on a false life, but you can't cast, you can cast false life every turn. If you do, you're doing nothing else because that takes your action. So what you really want for that first one, augmented health, is some sort of source that renews your temporary hit points every turn, okay? That would make it good. And the second part, same kind of thing. If the only way you spend hit point dice is by taking a short rest, this is not great. It's like meh, So in all of those situations, I would give this probably less than a C. I would say it's a D, right? Now, if you have a feature like Durable, the feat that allows you to just spend a hit die as your bonus action, This synergizes with that because I don't know if durable is great because you just roll your hit point die, you add nothing to it, and you regain that, and you could roll a 1. Okay, now this just makes it a 10 or a 12 if you're fighter ranger, 10 for fighter ranger paladin, blood hunter, 12 if you're a barbarian, and that actually is pretty nice. Okay, so it synergizes with durable. If you have other features allow you to spend hit point die, there are other features that do that. There's spells that do that. That certainly increases the value of this. But and if talking about the temporary hit points, right? If you have something like a Twilight Cleric in your party that's just going to give you temporary hit points every turn, which most DMs will ban that subclass because it's just too powerful. Or the new Preserver Druid. But there are other ways to do it. If you have one of those features of a party member in your class, or it's you, that augmented health is suddenly quite good. But there's also this spell Heroism that people rarely cast, and I think it gets they bash it a lot. Heroism is quite good. I think it's quite good. At level 20, your spellcasting modifier should be maxed out, so you're going to get 5 temporary hit points. Boon of Bountiful health will double that to 10 every turn. That's pretty good with a first level spell. And if you upcast it, you can put it on more people. So if you put this on your entire party, you can put Heroism on your entire party with a 5th level spell slot, 5 of you, 6 level spell slot if there's 6 of you. And all of you have these renewing temporary hit points, and you're immune to the Frightened condition, which suppresses the effects of Frightened if you were frightened first. I know I've seen people say that it doesn't do that. Here's the sage advice that says it does. The Heroism spell specifically suppresses the Frightened condition if it was already on you. So yes, it does that. Okay, so the Heroism spell, quite good. So if you if you got somebody in the party who's like wanting to spend their concentration on, or willing to spend their concentration on the Heroism spell, that synergizes really well with Boon of Bountiful Health. If you don't have another source of renewing temporary hit points that renews every turn without action economy. So yeah, in those cases, I would give this a B, maybe higher. Depends on how often you renew and some other factors, but this could be a B or higher, A, maybe a low A. And so I kind of averaged it out and said, well, in these conditions it's a D, in these conditions it's a B or higher. I give it a C on average overall. But this is definitely one, don't just take it and think, oh, it's going to be okay. You need to build for this. Boon of Communication. All right, increase your intelligence, wisdom, or charisma by 1 to a maximum of 30. Then you get Cunning Speaker. You don't have disadvantage on ability checks to influence hostile creatures. Okay. Gifted Interpreter. You understand the literal meaning. I don't know why they had to put that in there. The literal meaning of any language you hear or see. You can understand the literal meaning of any written language you see. Mental Communication. You gain telepathy with a range of 120 feet. All right. This is not good. It's a D for face because it's just about communication, right? There are a lot of ways to get telepathy. There's even the telepathy spell if you really need to, be telepathic. That's just a 7th level spell slot without spending your 1 epic boon you get by level 20 on this. Sure, it's nice to not have disadvantage on ability checks to influence hostile creatures. Doesn't happen a lot. That's a circumstantial situation. Gifted Interpreter. Now this one, I don't know why they had to put literal in there. Yes, that is how it works in real life. Okay. Yes, it is. When you first start learning a second language that's not your native language, you often learn the literal meaning of things and not the intended meaning. But this is a game, and you just added a bunch of overhead to the DM and the player, more so the DM, as they have to try to convey literal meaning infer what is the literal meaning of these goblin words and how would you interpret that. All right, it could be fun for some role play moments at best. Most likely it's just adding a bunch of unnecessary overhead, especially since you just gain telepathy, which just means forget languages. It's a universal translator. You can just speak with them telepathically. As long as they know a language, you can talk with anyone. And even that's not a great ability. Just because it's so common. By 19th level, there's a good chance you have other ways to do this. A helm of telepathy. You can get a helm of telepathy that will do this. There are so many ways to have telepathy, and not everyone in the party needs it. It's nice if at least one in the party has telepathy, but even that's not necessary. And let's stack this up against the Boon of Skills, right? The Boon of Skills just gives you proficiency in every skill. Why not just, all right, this is heroic fantasy, right? Epic fantasy. Why not just say you're proficient in every language? Done. Forget the gifted interpreter. Just proficient in every language, right? Why not? And that still wouldn't make this a good epic boon. It would still that would make it. I don't know if that would bring it up to a C. Okay, so friends, don't let friends fall into the trap of taking this. Okay, guys, like don't. It's not. If you're level 19 or 20, you're doing a lot of combats. This is an epic campaign. You're fighting big monsters. This is not like a role play only or social only campaign where you're just doing intrigue. Those will probably end around level 5 or 6 or something like that. I don't know. It could happen. And if maybe talk with your DM, right? Talk with your DM. If this is one of those campaigns where this is going to be a huge deal, great. Maybe your DM will tell you. Otherwise, don't take this. Boon of Desperate Resilience. You can increase your strength or constitution by 1 to a maximum of 30, and then defense of body and mind. While you are bloodied, you have resistance to every damage type except force. So I gave this one a B for tanks and frontliners who are going to really care about damage resistance, and this gives you damage resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing, which are the most common and most frequent, right? For everyone else, I'd say this is a D. I mean, it is a survival feature, but everyone else shouldn't be taking that much damage. Yeah, it's going to happen. You could get out of position, but your job, if you're not a tank or a frontliner, your job is to not be targeted. Part of your job is to avoid being targeted, stand in places where you can't be targeted, stand far away, stand around corners if you can. Definitely don't be close to the front line. Sure, monsters can still have like abilities that like move them suddenly forward and they can get to you, and that's going to happen, but it's not going to happen often enough that I would take this. Like I would take a lot of other epic boons before I took this. There's a lot better epic boons for casters and all damage dealers and everyone than this. Don't spend your one epic boon. If you're not a tank or a frontliner, do not spend your one epic boon on this. Now, if you are a tank or a frontliner, you might spend your one epic boon on this. As a tank, yeah, if you're not a barbarian, this is pretty good for you because barbarians already have rage for resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing. This is going to give you a lot of resistances that you're going to care about, but I'm not going to say that you definitely should take this as a tank, right? Like I said at the beginning, if you're already tanky enough, like you're not just, you're not going below half hit points in most fights, do not take this because it only starts applying after you're below half hit points, right? If you're just fine most of the time because you've got a strong healer in the party, don't take this. This is a waste. Take something else that's better. On the other hand, if you don't have a strong healer, I don't know how you made it this far without a strong healer and as a tank, then you probably definitely want this. And you're not tanky enough, take it. Same thing for frontliner, right? Although frontliners are weighted more heavily towards you want balanced offense and defense, right? So probably combat prowess is still better to like increase your damage. Now, if there's no tank in your party and all of your frontliners are built to be like the offensive frontliner as opposed to a defensive frontliner. Defensive frontliners have like a shield and one weapon usually and a relatively high AC. Offensive frontliners have like a great weapon or are dual wielding, and so they don't have a shield. Their AC is a bit lower. They're less hit points. They're taking more damage. Yeah, so if there is no tank and no defensive frontliners, and you guys are getting creamed a lot, okay, yeah, probably take this so that when you go bloodied, you're less likely to die. Now, the other reason a frontliner might want to take this is because you want to synergize with all of the other bloodied condition feats, right? There's the Purple Dragon Commandant that increases your offense while you're bloodied. So this and taking this with that, you have synergy because you're going to hit bloodied, and then your hit points are going to go down slower. So it's okay staying bloodied longer. Like you're fine just being bloodied because you now have resistance to everything. And now while you're bloodied, you have all these other advantages, right, from your other feats. So if you want to synergize those together, this kind of becomes like a ranked feat. I would say for a damage dealer, this becomes A ranked for a damage dealer frontline when you have those other feats and you put them all together. Okay. Everyone else, I don't think you should take this. It's all the other feats are more worthwhile for what you're trying to accomplish. Boon of Exquisite Radiance. Increase one ability score by 1 to up to 30. Eternal Rest. Creatures you reduce to 0 hit points can't become undead. Powerful Radiance. When you make a damage roll that deals radiant damage, you can instead use the highest number possible for each damage die. Once you use this benefit, you can't do so again until you finish a long rest. I think this is bad. It's kind of a trap. It makes you excited for like if you're a paladin with a smite, and you're like, yeah, I'm gonna really pop off some big smites. You're gonna pop off one big smite per day. That's your whole epic boon, one big smite. And I guess you'll save it for what you think might be the boss fight. But what if you end up not fighting the boss fight this long rest? Then you wasted it. I don't like that it's restricted to one long rest. Even the Tempest Domain Cleric, who has a similar ability that they get at level 6, they can use it Channel Divinity number of times per day, which is 2 to 4 plus 1 per short rest, right? And they're doing the same thing from level 6 with Thunder and Lightning. So, yeah, this is a trap. And the Eternal Rest, pointless. Completely pointless. I can't think of a single time in 10,000 plus hours of DMing 5th edition where the player character reduced a creature to 0 and someone else monster tried to raise it. I think there are some monsters who can do that. Maybe, but it's a circumstantial situation. Very, very circumstantial situation at best, right? They'd have to be like, you fought all these things and then they come by later and they have animate dead and then they're going to start animating them. And I've never, not in a single published adventure by WotC or any third party partner that I've read, does that. Now, would that be a cool thing? Sure. Put it on a boss, homebrew something great. That's going to be super, super rare. You should not spend your one epic boon you're going to get through level 20 on that. Okay. Just ridiculous. And there are a few features where, like Finger of Death, where it would, they could become an undead when you kill them. But Finger of Undeath is not a good spell for damage. The reason you're casting it is because you're hoping to turn them into a zombie when you kill them. And this nullifies that. You can't even turn it off. So if you have this boon and you cast Finger of Undeath and you kill them, you cannot decide to let them become undead instead. This just says they can't become undead. So, cool and thematic, good for like a NPC who's like an important story plot point, maybe. But this is not good for player characters, okay? I don't know. Like if you're just excited to have one big radiant blast per day, go for it. It might be fun. But you're probably disappointed as you see everybody else, like the other damage dealers in your party who have combat prowess, epic boon, right? Where they just get to turn one miss into a hit every turn, right? They're gonna blow your damage away. They're just gonna blow you away because you're gonna miss, 40% of the time, something like that, and they're gonna hit almost every single attack every turn because you don't often miss more than one. I mean, sometimes, but you don't often miss more than one per turn. They're gonna, over the course of a single combat, blow your damage away. So this will let you feel like more damage in one turn than them once per day. This is not worth it. It's a trap. Boon of Fluid Forms. Okay. Here we go. You can increase your intelligence, wisdom, or charisma by 1 to a maximum of 30, and then you have Shape Changer. I'm going to skip down to Hardy Transformation real quick. I don't know why they separated this, guys. Come on, WotC. Don't make it harder for us to parse out the features. So when you gain temporary hit points, when you use Shapeshift, which that is not the common name for features where you're change shape, it is specifically referenced, or that specific structure is exactly what they put up there under Shape Changer. So I think it only applies to this feature's Shape Changer ability, this boon's Shape Changer ability. So whenever you use this feature's Shape Changer ability, you can increase the number of temporary hit points you get by 20, which is nice. I just wish they just put it in there so that we know how it all works together. All right, so let's go back to Shape Changer. You can take the magic action to shapeshift into a beast, humanoid, or monstrosity with a challenge rating no higher than 10. When you shapeshift, you gain a number of temporary hit points equal to the hit points of the form plus 20, because if you read that down below. All right, the shapeshift lasts for an hour. It ends early if you have no temporary hit points, or if you take a magic action to return to your true form. Your game statistics are replaced by the stat block of the chosen form, but you retain your creature type, alignment, personality, intelligence, wisdom, charisma, scores, hit points, hit point dice, proficiencies, and ability to communicate. If you have the spellcasting or pact magic feature, you retain it too. Upon shapeshifting, you determine whether your equipment drops to the ground or changes in size and shape to fit the new form while you're in it. Once you use this benefit, you can't do so until you finish a long rest. All right, there's one point I want to call out first, which is this. It's not just beast. So when you first read this, you might be thinking polymorph and druid's wild shape, right? This is not limited to beast. You also get humanoid and monstrosity stat blocks. Okay, now you are limited to CR10, and in that way, it's not as good as polymorph, you would think, because polymorph lets you turn into a beast of any CR up to your level, except there are no beast stat blocks above CR8. So there's no like level 19 beast stat block. So polymorph does not beat this in any way. You also gain temporary hit points equal to the form's hit points. So in that way, that's similar to the beast, to the polymorph, but you also get the plus 20, which is nice. And there are a number of really good humanoid forms, even from just the 2024 monster manual. Here are the stat blocks that are right at CR10. Okay, Cultist Hierophant, Noble Prodigy, Performer Legend, Spy Master, Warrior Commander. These are pretty good stat blocks. Okay, now there are some monstrosity stat blocks. There's one at CR9 and some others that are lower than that can give you, and you still might want to consider those for certain kinds of versatility. If you need immunity to a damage type, all right, you can turn into the Abominable Yeti, which is immune to cold. Or if you need to be immune to fire, you can turn into Rimmeraz, which is immune to both cold and fire. And there's one you can turn into a Mimic, which is a monstrosity, which is immune to acid. And there's another one that's immune to poison. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. So you can be immune just from that versatility alone. There are a lot of damage types you can just be immune to, okay? And a lot of versatility, right? Mimics shape changing, sticking to things. Okay, and then you have these humanoid stat blocks that are decent. Now, none of these stat blocks are stronger than your level 19 player character. Okay, none of them are stronger, but they bring some interesting versatility. And you don't have to be a spellcaster to take this, right? The only thing that might cause you to pause and reconsider is the fact that it only increases intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. So if you're not a monk and you're some other kind of non-spellcaster martial, you might be like, well, do I really want to, raise one of those mental stats that I don't care about in order to get this? You might. This is that good. You might, because several of these stat blocks, or most of these stat blocks, have spellcasting. So now you can have spellcasting. Yet even if you are a spellcaster, it's always nice to have spellcasting that might not be on your spell list. So you can turn into these and access a different spell. Not to mention that these all have all kinds of interesting abilities that player characters don't normally have. So it's great for versatility. But I want to reiterate, none of these are stronger than a level 19 player character. So you do this for versatility, maybe to save yourself if you're, down to like really low on hit points. Then you do this, and all of a sudden you get, with a warrior commander, you could have like 161 hit points plus 20. So you're looking at 181 temporary hit points. That puts you back in the fight. Now you're fighting as a warrior commander instead, which is decent, not as good as a level 19 player character, but it's better than a level 19 player character who's unconscious, right? Okay, so that's pretty good. The next part we need to zoom in on is right there, that word proficiencies. What does that mean? Come on, Watsy, help us out. All right, there's a couple of ways you could interpret that. You can interpret it as strict, which there is a vocal minority who really are passionate that you got to strictly interpret this, except that they're not consistent with themselves. And that strict interpretation would be, well, it only applies to things that have proficiency in a name. So you retain only your skill proficiencies, but not your skill expertise, because skill expertise doesn't say proficiency. It is a degree of proficiency, but it is not a proficiency. So you would lose your expertise. You would retain your saving throw proficiencies. You would retain your weapon proficiencies, but you would not use your proficiency bonus for weapon attacks, unarmed strikes, or your spell save DC. You should be using the stat block's proficiency bonus for your spell save DC. And that's usually where they don't, the ones who are like vocally opposed to this, where they don't agree with themselves. They're inconsistent with their interpretation. Okay. Now, if you just interpret this liberally and say, well, that means, yes, anything I'm proficient with, but also it implies my degree of proficiency with things, right? Not just whether or not I have proficiency. And if you interpret it that way, then you retain your skill expertise, because expertise is a degree of proficiency, and you retain it. You use your proficiency bonus for weapon attacks, unarmed strikes, and your spell save DC, because those are degrees of proficiency. Your proficiency bonus is better than those stat blocks proficiency bonus. You should retain your degree of proficiency. And you could interpret it either way, but why would you go strict? Why would you nerf this completely unnecessarily? Because even if you go liberal, this is an A. And it's an A because of versatility and survivability. This is not OP, not even close. It does not need to be nerfed. Just like the Moon Druid Wild Shape, just like the UA version of the Transmuter Wizard, don't unnecessarily nerf this thing, because it is too weak. If you go strict interpretation on this, I would drop it probably to a B or a C on all of those rankings. Because now the best part of what you would have done is spell casting, and you would have to lower your spell save DC by at least 2. because a CR 10 stat block has a proficiency bonus of 4. A level 19 player character has a proficiency bonus of 6. So you got to lower it by 2 at least. And if you choose a lower CR monster, CR 8 or lower, you got to lower it by 3. You have to, or you're not consistent with your interpretation of how this works. Okay? And it's completely unnecessary. Why would you nerf this epic boon that way just to hurt your players, I guess? I don't know. And if that's what you're going for as a DM, you probably shouldn't be DMing. If you're adversarial with your players, don't be a DM. I don't know. All right, let's move on. Boon of Fortune's Favor. You can increase any ability score by 1 to a maximum of 30, and you get to reroll any saving throw that you fail once per turn. Once per round. Because once you do it, you can't do it until the start of the next turn. It is not very often that you are making multiple saving throws per round. It's very rare, I would say. Very, very rare. So I would say this is strong, right? And this is a solid survivability function, highly desirable for every character, I would say. The only times where this shouldn't be high on your list to consider is maybe you have a paladin in the party, like a level 20 paladin with a 30-foot aura of protection, which is giving you all a decent chance to save. A fighter with Indomitable, right? You may not, this would still be nice for you, but you'd probably want to consider something else, right? You'd probably still want combat prowess because you have Indomitable for those times when you fail, and then especially if there's a paladin in your party. But a lot of the time, a lot of builds, a lot of classes, yeah, this is a solid pick. You would not be disappointed by doing this because you're going to be making, especially at high levels of play, right? We're talking level 19 and up. You're going to be making saving throws pretty frequently. Every combat probably. Every combat, you probably be making a few saving throws, and this is going to help you with all of them, unless you're just lucky and make them all, right? Solid pick. Next, Boon of Poison Mastery. Increase one ability score by 1 to a maximum of 30. Antitoxic. You have immunity to the poison condition and poison damage. Perfect Poisoner. Once per turn, when you roll a dice to determine poison damage a creature takes from your attack, spell, or feature, you can instead use the highest number possible for each die. Okay. I so wanted to like this one. Like, poison is one of those things where I think it should be cool. I think it should function. It's thematic for certain kinds of builds, and yet the nature of the way they've designed the game or implemented the game, it's not a great damage type to deal. Now, it is a great damage type to resist or be immune to. So for survivability, I give this a solid B. And if you're wondering why I didn't give it higher, a lot of times you're not going to be taking poison damage. Yeah. It just doesn't come up every combat. Certainly not, not even every session. Poison damage doesn't come up. So there'll be plenty of times where this isn't helping you. The poison condition doesn't always come up. It's common, but not that common. There's still likelihood that you'll go multiple sessions without ever having to face the poison condition. Or it could be every session. It could be every combat. It just really depends. And so there's no flexibility. So I didn't give it an A. Unlike the Boon of Fluid Forms, where you can access poison immunity, cold immunity, fire immunity, acid immunity, and probably some others. Like, I just looked at the monster manual, the 2024 monster manual. I didn't even research other things. You can probably access all kinds of immunities, and you can do it on demand, right? Oh, shoot, I'm facing a bunch of fire damage. I'm going to switch to be a Remoraz, and now I'm immune to fire, right? You can't switch this. So I'll give that one a B. Perfect Poisoner, I wanted to like this one more, but everybody say it with me. The problem with poison damage is not poison resistance. It is monsters being immune to poison. Because in the whole monster manual and all the expanded content, there are more creatures immune to poison by far than anything else. Like, there's hundreds of creatures immune to poison and a handful, like a dozen, that are resistant to poison. Okay. So you're gonna have lots of those feel bad moments, and that would have changed this from a C level epic boon to an A if they had just said perfect poisoner. Yep, when you deal poison damage, if they're immune, they instead treat it as resistant. All right, if it just did that, this would be A level. As it is, it's too likely that you're gonna have moments where you do poison damage and they're immune. Right? It's gonna happen regularly. Not every combat, but regularly, where your whole, and if you took this, you probably took like the poisoner feat, right? And you're trying to optimize around poison, and all of those are going to be nullified if the monster is just immune to poison damage, which there are hundreds. So bummer, but and there aren't a lot of sources of poison damage either. Right? You're talking the poisoner feat and a few other niche abilities. There are only like 3 spells that deal poison damage. So if you're a spell casting and you're trying to be like a poison spellcaster, which is a cool theme, a cool character theme, a poison spellcaster, I love the theme. It just doesn't work in this version of D&D yet because there are 3 spells that deal poison damage. None of them are good. There's just not a lot, and there's no ways to buff them. So you're not going to be dealing a lot of damage. The best way to like optimize around this would be, yes, take the poisoner feat, maybe be an assassin rogue who can reliably also deal more poison damage, and then get like a poison damage dealing weapon, right? Like Serpent Fang sword, which would mean you're doing 10 poison damage on every hit instead of 1d10. That might be worth it, but you have no attack bonus on that. The Dragon Wing bow, yep, you can do an extra 6 poison damage on every hit. Is that worth it? Maybe. Again, it all comes down. The whole problem is those feel bad moments where the boss you're fighting is immune to poison and your whole spec is useless now. Your whole build is now nullified. The best thing might be if you get the Flail of Tiamat, which can deal poison damage, but you can also at any time choose to do those other damage types, and you still have a +3 on your attack and damage bonus. But if they're not immune to poison, you can hit them with 20 points of poison damage on top of every hit. That'll be pretty good. And if they are immune to poison, you just switch to another damage type. And yes, you're not leveraging your epic boon, but at least you're still dealing like acid, fire, cold, lightning, or something with your weapon. So if you can get a hold of this legendary weapon, yeah, in those kind of scenarios, I might, just for the fun of it, just because I want to be a poisoner, not because it's the best. It's not optimized, but just because I want to be a poisoner, I might try that. Although this doesn't work for rogues, so you can't sneak attack with a flail, which is the best way to, optimize all around this. So I don't know. I give it a C, unfortunately. C for frontliner, skirmisher, range damage dealers, and it's a B for survival. Boon of Revelry. All right, you can increase your intelligence, wisdom, or charisma by 1 to a maximum of 30. Inspired Dance. You always have Otto's Irresistible Dance spell prepared. You can cast it once without a spell slot. You regain the ability to cast it when you finish a long rest. You can also cast a spell using any spell slots you have at the appropriate level. When you cast a spell, it requires no spell components, and taking damage doesn't break your concentration on it. Sing Out. While a creature that failed its saving throw against your Otto's Irresistible Dance has the charm condition from that spell, it can't cast spells with verbal components, and it sings delightful nonsense if it can sing. Okay, guys. Why do you keep trying to double down on Otto's Irresistible Dance? It is a bad spell. It is just bad. And I don't think this is worth it. This doesn't buff it. This is a C-level epic boon. Okay, let's talk about a few of the things. First up, Tasha's Hideous Laughter is better than Otto's Irresistible Dance in almost every way, right? Because it causes them to fall prone and be incapacitated as well, right? And if you cast Tasha's Hideous Laughter at 6th level, you're targeting 6 creatures with no friendly fire. Otto's Irresistible Dance, 1 creature, and you can't upcast this to hit more. So just 1 creature. Now, people kind of gloss over both of these points. Here's how Otto's Irresistible Dance is better than Tasha's Hideous Laughter, and it's still not worth it, but there are 2 ways it's better. One, even if they make their saving throw, Otto's Irresistible Dance causes them on their next turn to waste all of their movement, and they can't move. It doesn't reduce their speed to 0. It just means they spend all of their movement speed dancing in place. So you could hit a legendary boss with this. They can use their legendary resistance to save, and they still can't move because they're going to waste all of their movement speed. Okay? So in that scenario, it's better. Okay? And maybe that's worth it for a 6th level spell slot. I don't know. You'd have to be pretty desperate. Like, this is a boss who maybe has no ranged attacks, a legendary monster with no ranged attacks, which you shouldn't do, right? DMs, like, that's a bad design. And you're going to make it dance in place so it can't reach anybody, and so it wastes its whole turn because it can't do anything else, right? The old version of the Tarask, right? Okay, you just get a bunch of spellcasters who all have Otto's Irresistible Dance. Let's make it so it can't move ever. Every round, we're going to make it waste its movement. So that's one way it's better. The other way it's better is than Tasha's Hideous Laughter is with Tasha's Hideous Laughter, if you hit the creature that's been affected by Tasha's Hideous Laughter, they get a re-roll a save, right? And I think they have advantage when you cause damage to them, if I remember right. With Otto's Irresistible Dance, they do not get a resave when you hit them. So you can just wail on them and they still have to keep dancing, okay? Which is better. That part of it is better than Tasha's Hideous Laughter. It's not very often that you want to try to like put a crowd control effect on the creature that you're all trying to kill and burn down. But you might on the boss, right? You use Tasha's Hideous Laughter for all the minions, and then put this on the boss and keep hitting them with it until they fail their save. And then if they're a spellcaster, now they can't cast spells. This is a C, still a C, guys. Even with all the enhancements, it's still a C. And even if they took all these enhancements and put them into the base spell, Otto's Irresistible Dance, I still think it's a niche circumstantial spell and not good because it's just too high level. Like maybe if this was a third level spell, all right, a third level spell, it'd be a good spell. But at sixth level, this is not a good spell. It just isn't. And by the way, monster stat blocks from the 2024 monster manuals that are CR 19 and higher, 12 of the 28, there are only 28 stat blocks, 12 of them are immune to the charmed condition. Now, the clause where if they save and they still have to waste their movement to stand in place dancing, that's still it still looks like it bypasses the charm immunity. So even if they're immune, at the very least, they're going to waste their turn, not their whole turn, just their movement speed on the next turn to dance in place. So you still get that effect. Is it worth it for a 6th level spell slot? No, I don't think so. Boon of Terror. Increase your charisma only by 1 to a maximum of 30, which is probably the worst part of this whole epic boon. Fearless. You have immunity to the frightened condition. Nice. Flee, fools. When a creature with a frightened condition starts its turn within 60 feet of you, you can take a reaction to stoke its terror, provided you can see the creature, and it isn't behind total cover. If you do so, the creature must succeed on a wisdom saving throw, standard calculation against using your charisma, or spend its turn moving away from you by the fastest means available. Once you use this benefit, you can't use it again until you finish a short or long rest, and you also gain expertise in intimidation. Okay, so I guess first up, being immune to the frightened condition is nice. The problem comes if you have a paladin in the party and they've got their aura of protection. This is now pointless. So, double check with if this is a high level one shot, double check with the rest of the party for what they're building before you take this epic boon, because then you might just have a feel bad moment where your epic boon, one of its core features, just doesn't matter. Also, stat blocks level CR 19 and higher, 13 of the 28 are immune to the frightened condition. So that will nullify this epic boon as well. But if they're not immune, and they might be resistant, so they might have advantage, that's a pretty common feature at this level too, then this is actually decent, right? But only if you have a reliable way to cause the frightened condition, whether it's you or somebody else in the party causing the frightened condition, because it doesn't have to be your frightened condition, just any creature that's frightened, then you can stoke its terror, okay? And that takes no resource. You can do it once per short or long rest, so you can do it decently often. I don't know if that's, yeah, I wish it was just more often, because you're still spending your reaction to do it. And I wish they were more clear. It always feels like they just don't put as much time and effort into the language they put into these epic boons, and so they can be quite unclear, unfortunately, often. So what does it mean that it spends its turn moving away from you by the fastest means available? I don't think it means only using their movement and they still have their actions, right? Otherwise, it would say they spend all of their movement moving away from you by the fastest means possible. So I think what this means is they must spend their actions also moving away from you. So they have to dash, and if they have a bonus action means of adding movement, then they should use that and also spend it to move away. And if they don't have a means of using their bonus action to increase their movement, but they can do something else with their bonus action, I don't think they can, because it says they must spend their turn moving away. They spend all of your turn moving away. So everything they can do would be used towards moving away, and they can't spend their turn to do anything else. So this kind of upgrades it to most of the effect you get from the fear spell, which is a lot more than the frightened condition, right? So this is a pretty strong control effect to apply to them, as long as they're not immune to the frightened condition and as long as you have a reliable source of causing frightened in the party. So I give it a C for face because the intimidation skill expertise applies to the face roll. It's not the common one you're using. It's not usually it's a kind of a circumstantial aspect of being in the face roll. Yeah, and then a B as a controller. I mean, it's nice, but this is not super good. So I don't know if I'd put this in the top 5 that you should be looking at for any build you have, any build at all. Now you could optimize around it and maybe make it even better. Like the undead warlock who can just cause somebody to be frightened with their eldritch blast once per turn, every turn for the length of their transformation, which is like 10 minutes, right? 10 minutes, 1 minute, something like that. It basically lasts the whole combat. Yeah, you might take this, and that might for that build, this might be an A. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think so because there are just too many creatures that are resistant and immune to the frightened condition at this level. So I still don't think that would be an A. That'd be like a B plus. Yeah, I don't think you should optimize around this. Boon of the Bright Sun. Okay, you increase your Constitution, Wisdom, or Charisma. Sorry, intelligence characters, wizards and scions. Increase one of those by 1 to a maximum of 30. Daylight Presence. As a bonus action, you can radiate 30-foot emanation of bright light that is sunlight. If any of the emanations area overlaps with an area of darkness created by a spell, that spell is dispelled. The emanation lasts until you dismiss it, no action required, die, or have the incapacitated condition. Notice there is no resource limitation. So yeah, you can turn it on and off, and it ends if you're incapacitated, but you can leave it on all the time. You can turn it off. You can turn it on as many times as you want. It just takes your bonus action. Fortifying Light. When your daylight presence is active at the start of each of your turns, you and allies you can see in the daylight presence gain 10 temporary hit points. All right, so this synergizes with the Boon of Bountiful Health. So if you have this and somebody else in the party has that, they are getting 15 temporary hit points every round instead of 10. That makes the Boon of Bountiful Health a lot better than it is to synergize with this. But let's talk about that daylight presence. That's basically the daylight spell, but with the daylight spell has a 60-foot emanation of bright light and a 60-foot dim light beyond that. So this is a lower radius, but 30 foot is still huge. So I don't know that you're going to care that much that it's a lesser radius. The bright light, and this doesn't give dim light, just the bright light, counts as sunlight. And this is a different wording than you see in the other spells, where they say things like it dispels if it overlaps with a darkness spell or a spell that causes darkness, it dispels the darkness. This says it dispels the spell, which makes me think that if like the daylight spell overlaps with Hunger of Hadar, the daylight spell might end the Hunger of Hadar's darkness effect, but not the whole spell, whereas this would end the whole spell. Even if the spell is cast at a 5th level, or even if it's a higher level spell that causes darkness, like there's a few of them that cause a darkness effect, this ends the spell. Just done, no roll, no ability check, just ends all those spells. So in a lot of ways, this is better than the daylight spell. And this is a decent one to consider. All right, you get that temporary hit point effect, which is every turn, right? So every round, every one of your allies, you and your allies are gaining 10 temporary hit points. That's decently strong. I mean, welcome back to the. That's just giving everybody the Twilight Cleric effect, right? And the Preserver Druid effect, right? Temporary hit points for everyone. And that's a lot of temporary hit points. It just renews every round. Okay, but also there are about 26, I may have gotten the count slightly wrong, 26 monsters in the 2024 Monster Manual that have some form of light sensitivity. Some of them have sunlight sensitivity, some have what's called light sensitivity, and some have these effects that just when they're in dim light, they gain certain benefits. So I lumped all those together. There's 26 of them in the 2024 Monster Manual that are affected, that will be either harmed or debuffed by you having light on them, having bright light on them. So and some of those monsters, like the vampire, take 20 radiant damage from the debuff. So in those instances, that will trivialize those encounters. And in the rest of the instances, this is going to do nothing to them. I still give it an A for support, B as a controller, and B for versatility. This is pretty good. Boon of the Furious Storm. Increase your intelligence, wisdom, or charisma by 1 to a maximum of 30. Eye of the Storm. You have resistance to lightning and thunder damage. While you are bloodied, you have immunity to lightning and thunder damage. Storm Strength. Creatures have disadvantage on saving throws against your spells that deal lightning or thunder damage. So this one starts off boring and gets interesting. Okay. Resistance to lightning and thunder damage, not very uncommon. There's a few different ways to get it. Some subclasses just get it, like the Storm Sorcerer and the Tempest Cleric get this kind of stuff. But while you're bloodied, you're immune. Okay, that's an interesting addition. Pretty nice. Except that lightning and thunder damage are not super common from monsters, so they're not going to deal that often. And if you are, most builds, you're not. Again, you shouldn't be taking a lot of damage, and it's not highly likely that it's going to be from lightning and thunder damage. So, in certain encounters against certain monsters, this will be super strong, and a lot of the time it'll be meaningless. So I give it a C for survival, just because of it's just not going to have a big effect very often. Storm Strength, though, on the other hand, pretty interesting. They have disadvantage on saving throws against your spells that deal lightning and thunder damage. So Lightning Bolt, they have disadvantage, right? Chain Lightning, they have disadvantage. I didn't give a ranking for controller, but because most lightning and thunder damage spells are just blast spells. Some of them have minor control effects like Thunder Wave. That could be nice, right? But at level 19, you shouldn't be casting Thunder Wave. If you need to get away, you should teleport. Don't cast Thunder Wave and hope that it works. There's like a Storm Aura one at high level that does lightning and thunder damage and has like some debuff effects. So maybe that one. But really, it's mainly going to help you as a blaster. So if you want to be a lightning thunder blaster specifically, this is probably an A. Yeah, if you're specking around lightning and thunder, you're some sort of like Tempest Cleric or combo Tempest Cleric, Wizard, or Tempest Cleric, Storm Sorcerer, and you're trying to be spec'd as a lightning thunder caster, this is A for that build specifically. So there you go. Boon of the Soul Drinker. I love just the name of this one. Sounds cool. Increase one ability score by 1 to a maximum of 30. You have resistance to cold and necrotic damage. Those come up more often than, in general, not always, in general, than lightning and thunder. So I give it a better rating there. But then Siphon Life. When an enemy within 120 feet of you is reduced to 0 hit points, you can take a reaction to regain 50 hit points. Once you use this benefit, you can't use it again until you finish a short or long rest. So once per short or long rest, you can regain 50 hit points. That's in 120 feet, like that's always going to be in range. Like it's going to be extremely rare that you're not within 120 feet of a creature that is reduced to 0 hit points. And it doesn't have to be reduced to 0 hit points by you. It can be by anyone. And it doesn't matter how many hit points it had or what CR it was. You can regain 50 hit points. You siphon its life, you gain 50 hit points. So you can reliably regain 50 hit points during a combat once per short or long rest. That's a big chunk of hit points. So I give it an A for survival all around. Yeah, this is a solid pick. Something you'd want to consider, and you can probably find some ways to like synergize around it. The bummer of this one, there is a bummer that you should keep in mind, which is if you are interested in this, you are probably a necromancer or undead warlock or something like that, and you're already likely to have resistance to necrotic damage. So now that's redundant, and it just feels bad, right? That you didn't get that benefit. It would be a lot nicer if they'd added some things, some clause that says if you already have one of these damage types, you can gain resistance to, maybe one of these other 3 or 4 damage types, just to avoid those redundancies that are just going to feel bad. And you're likely to do that if you're making this dark themed character, right? You're a dark themed necromantic type character, and you're going to lean in on all of these kind of dark themed features and feats and boons you can get, and a bunch of them give you necrotic resistance. And that's all going to be redundant. So that's unfortunate. All right, that is all of them from this book. And as you can see, like a lot of things from this book, it's a mixed bag. Some of them are quite good. Some of them are quite bad. There's a few in the middle. So mixed bag of selections here, which is very similar to what we got from the last Forgotten Realms book, where some things were quite good and there were some things that were quite bad. And I'll remind you, you can download this off of my Google Drive. You don't have to like screenshot it or anything like that or try to memorize it. You can get it in PDF format or CSV. And also, if you don't have enough D&D in your life, hit me up on Discord. The link's in the description. So is my Start Playing Games link. And remember, be cool to each other when you're playing D&D. It's for fun. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.